Okay, I think we're on. So let me get started by introducing myself. My name is Donna. I'm a computer engineer and I'm running for US Congress in Texas's 31st district, which is Northwest Austin, all the suburbs of Austin. So Cedar Park, Leander, Round Rock, which is the biggest city here in Williamson County, Georgetown. And then you go north and you hit Killeen, Temple, Belton, Parker Heights. So that's Texas's 31st district. Our campaign started out with 11 other campaigns in this race. There was a dozen. And on March 3rd, we advanced to the runoff election, which has now been postponed in Texas to July 14th. However, just this week, early voting has been moved up and elongated across 2 weeks. It will start on June 29th now. So early voting starts June 29th and voting day is July 14th. With that, we have a really exciting episode today because we have Texas's 31st District teenagers from the Austin Teen Coalition today, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Jordan. Please tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, I'm Jordan Tinnell. I'm going to be a senior next year at Round Rock High School. I'm a member of the dance team, the Dragonettes, as well as National Honor Society, and I'm going to be president of a girls' service organization called Sweethearts next year, which is really exciting. I've lived here in Texas in the 31st District my whole life, so
yeah. So yeah, you're invested, right?
Yes.
And I think you also said you're getting ready to vote. You got your registration stuff. Is that correct?
That is correct. I got my registration stuff in the mail just a week or so ago because I will be 18 right in time for election day this year. So I'm super excited for that. Feel like I've been waiting forever to vote. So.
Okay, and next we have Maynor. Maynor, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Minor, and me and Zach co-founded the Austin Teen Coalition. We're all seniors in Round Rock High School. Just outside this, I play on the soccer team, and I'm president of Maui Nations and the Future Business Leaders Association at our chapter of our school. And yeah, I've always been pretty interested in politics, and I thought this would be a really great way to increase engagement among our peers and people we know. Just to be a more active participant in the American political system, especially at the local levels.
That's cool. And you are also at Round Rock High School?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. And then we have Zach.
Hi, I'm also going to be a senior going into Round Rock High School. Outside of this organization, I'm the president of the Round Rock High School Hiking Club. I'm involved in theater. I'm involved in swimming. I'm involved in water polo. This organization, it started out as a 2 a.m. text by Minor saying we should start a think tank, and it has now progressed into interviewing hopefully a possible U.S. representative for our district.
There you go. And for those of you who are watching today, you can see that these are not just any teams; they're pretty well accomplished, on their own in their own merit. So lots of really talented background and what they've been up to. So before we get started, I know you have a lot of questions for me, but I have a question for you. What put our campaign on your radar? Like, how did you even find out about us?
I think so. It was my idea, I think, to email because when I would drive past, I'd always see your campaign signs just along the roads. And also,
okay.
I'm a Bengali American, and I know you are as well. That's true, right? And
yep,
right.
I
just thought it was really cool before we even started this whole thing to see, because I can probably count all the Bengali Americans in politics on one hand. So when we were looking for people to interview, it was your campaign was one of the first, off my mind. And also, we thought it was really cool what's going on in the primary right now with the runoff election. And we just thought if we could possibly, just see who the candidates are and what they're about. We thought that'd be a really good thing for people who are maybe not too well acquainted with what's going on in the primary runoff election right now.
Well, I have to say that that road sign that you saw has been totally worth it, because at least that caught your that caught your eye, so that it worked while you were driving. So that's really great to hear. So I know you have lots of questions for me, and I would love to try to answer them the best as I can.
Right. So we got a lot of questions from our peers. We asked everyone on social media and everyone that we know questions for you. We got them to research your campaign and go on your website to see your specific, like what you support and all your policies. And our first question comes from my personal friend, Kate Lane. What major issue first made you realize you wanted to run for office?
Yeah, when I first started working right out of school, very early on in my career, I used to be a development and design engineer, and we had an entire assembly line on the bottom of floor of my company. And a couple of years into my first job, every single assembly worker was laid off. Their jobs were moved to Mexico. Many of them never worked a day in their life again, and none of them had any job retraining issues. And this has always left a real profound impact on me throughout my career. So what I would do is when I started work, when I moved to Austin, over 14 years ago, I started trying to help people with their careers, help them write resumes, get better jobs, get promoted, really try to impact their bottom line, like their earnings. So that makes a huge difference, right? Where you can live, where you can go to school, et cetera, right? Neighborhood you can stay in. So that was kind of my impetus. But then about 5 or 6 years ago, I started working on a nonprofit. It's called Product Camp Austin, and we provide continuing education for anybody who wants it. And during the 2008-2009 downturn, and I know that's a long way away for you guys, and you were probably little kids back then, but a lot of people that were really well educated, even in Austin, were out of jobs for months. Some of them were out of jobs for over a year and a half. Some were out of jobs for 2 years. And I felt like it doesn't make any sense that you worked your entire life and all of a sudden you lose your job and now you don't have basic health insurance. You can't cover your kids. Like you might have teenagers. If you're the only working parent and health insurance comes through you, you don't have that. So these things started building up. And then in 2018, December, day before Christmas, my mom hurt her knee. And I was trying to find a place to get her knee looked at. And we went into a facility, and after the doctor saw it, he said, I'm gonna need an MRI before I could do anything. And he came back and I said, oh, that's great. I can see the MRI right next door. And he said, you know what? The doctor's in network, but the MRI machine is not. And that just blew my mind, that we have this healthcare system that doesn't take into account some basic, common sense things like there's an MRI right next door to you and you can't look at this person's knee. And these are the kind of things that really led me to believe, look, if the average working person, someone like me who works for a living, doesn't come out and get involved in what we expect from our community, our lives, our basic needs, which is healthcare, education, a good neighborhood to live in, right? Basic things, then we can't bring change. And that's what really led me to say, hey, it's important for us to have representation and someone who's actually going to work for our needs. So these are some of the things that kind of led up to me wanting to run for office. I never, ever dreamed in my life actually running for office prior to that, because I was an engineer, I had a really great career, and really wasn't thinking about politics in that way, even though I enjoyed it. So
that's really interesting. So you're not a career politician, you were an engineer before this.
Yeah, so I have never run for office. I have never held for office. In fact, the only time that I have actually won an election was when I got elected to be president of the 4,000 member nonprofit that I led. But other than that, no, I've never been involved in politics. This is my first run.
Right. Me personally, I was during the last the Democratic nominee election, I was a big supporter of Andrew Yang. And your your story actually reminds me a lot of his. He was never a career politician. He had a nonprofit organization, and a big thing that he always went for was the automation of a bunch of industries and how a new recession is going to hit. And I think you touched a lot on that. Yes, I wasn't alive during the 2008-2009 financial crisis, but a new one.
You weren't
Well,
alive.
I was
Zach,
alive. Sorry,
I knew you did.
I wasn't. I'm not like I'm not 10 years old. I'm 16, but I
You weren't
wasn't.
aware.
I
We
was
get
just
it.
a little baby. I was just
Yeah.
a toddler. But
Yeah.
a new one is most likely going to hit us soon. So yeah, because I'm applying for my first job. Well, I applied to Chick-fil-A. They still haven't called me back. But I'm sure they'll get back to me. They're just busy. But yeah.
I really liked your answer about the 2008 recession because that hit my family really hard personally because both of my parents work for Dell Technologies, and both my parents have college degrees, and all of a sudden my dad was out of work after 2008 because he was laid off, and it was just I really liked your answer and how that kind of brought you into it too, because that's important to me also.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and Jordan, you got the next question?
Oh, yeah. So we saw on your website, this is
Yeah.
from Brianna Fruget, I think so. And then, so she saw on your website that you support the change of health insurance in America. What do you plan to do personally? And with the steps you plan to take, how can you ensure that they're the right ones to improve the system?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if you look at what the American people want and you ask them, are you satisfied with your healthcare right now, private health insurance, or you're satisfied with whatever healthcare you have, the overwhelming majority of Americans across this entire country, across all 50 states, including people with high paid jobs, say they are not satisfied with their current healthcare. And there's many reasons for that. We can get into it. But the main reason is, number one, even if you have a really great job, in between jobs, when you get laid off, you are not covered. You have to pay for your health insurance. You have to pay for your premium out of pocket. This is a challenge even people who are doing well face. That's number one. Number two, the biggest reason for bankruptcy in the United States is healthcare bills. So people who have, gotten sick and they maybe even have insurance, but they still have thousands of dollars in debt. And that's the biggest reason. So you can tell that this is an issue. Now let's move to Texas. If you look at Texas, Texas has the most number of people of all 50 states that do not have insurance. They are not insured at all. That means all these people have no health insurance. And what did COVID-19 teach us? That if you don't have health insurance when you need it most, we have over 36 million people who are either unemployed or have been furloughed right now. So most of these people do not have any kind of health insurance coverage when they're the most vulnerable. That means that if you go get sick right now and you go to the hospital, there's a very good chance you're going to be hit with this huge bill. So this is why I am a huge advocate of, first of all, single payer healthcare, which just means that instead of having private health insurance in the middle, we have one person that takes our money and handles that. So you get rid of the profit in the middle that we're giving to private health insurance. But the most important thing is this: when I launched my Healthcare for All plan back in July of 2019, one of the things I pointed out is, look, in the United States, we have 80 million people, more than 80 million actually, that are either uninsured or underinsured. And if we want to cover all of these people, we need to scale the healthcare infrastructure. And guess what? As soon as COVID-19 hit and you had all these deaths in New York City, every single article was about scaling the infrastructure, how we didn't have enough PPE, how we didn't have enough emergency room capacity. And you guys saw those pictures that in Central Park, they were putting up tents to have people come in and preparing for people being ill and being hospitalized because of coronavirus. But I was talking about that prior to that we need to scale the healthcare infrastructure if we want to lower the cost. And lowering the cost is the big thing that my Healthcare for All plan focuses on. It doesn't really matter what we do in health insurance until we lower the cost of healthcare and get rid of the excess in here that we're paying for, that is just going to waste, that is going to profits, that is going to bureaucracy, that's going to red tape. we are not going to solve the healthcare problem. The bottom line is we are overpaying for healthcare by leaps and bounds. And I'll give you a figure. If you look at all the studies, there's over a dozen studies done by both the right wing and left wing types of think tanks, right? People say, oh, well, this was, funded by so-and-so, and this was funded by so-and-so. But if you look at all of them as an aggregate, every single one of them say that we are overpaying for healthcare, that it should cost between $2 trillion and $3 trillion to cover every single person. In 2018, Americans paid $3.68 trillion, leaving out 80 million plus, overpaying for healthcare. And that's my solution. So when you ask me, how can you ensure? The research has been done, the data is there, that if we go to a better healthcare policy, a better healthcare plan, we can cover everybody and we wouldn't have these challenges that we're facing right now. So I hope that answers your question on healthcare.
Most definitely. Thank you. That was a really great answer.
And the last thing I want to say, remember when your parents lost their job in 2008, 2009, what Healthcare for All does is it makes sure that you have healthcare no matter what. Imagine you work your entire life and then you're out of a job for 6 months, you lose your job and you can't afford to pay. For a family of 4, for example, it's anywhere between $1,500 to $2,000 of premiums per month. You can't afford to pay that. And let's say one of your kids gets sick in that 6 months. That's a tragedy for your family. That could be tens of thousands of dollars. That can drive you into bankruptcy. You could lose your home. And by the way, these are not just these are not the scenarios that might happen. Today. And so this shouldn't have to happen. You shouldn't have to be a teenager that has to worry, hey, if my parents lose their job or whoever's earning the money in the family lose their job, I'm not going to have healthcare. That shouldn't have to happen in the United States. And we can do it and we can lower the cost drastically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem kind of counterintuitive that when people are at their most vulnerable states between jobs or looking for jobs, that like their healthcare protects them the least and they don't have a fallback safety net, which is something that really shouldn't be having to worry about in this like time of uncertainty. And especially I think with coronavirus, it really does pull back like the curtain on a lot of problems. My mom is a healthcare worker and she said at a point people were wearing shoe coverings as masks because they didn't have enough PPE in their hospital. I think this coronavirus does like show like the raw issues with our healthcare system. Okay, and just to siphon into our next question, this comes from Lindsay Snowden, and she says, what do you plan to do to combat climate change? I feel like the issue is obviously being overshadowed by more immediate things going on in the world, but fighting climate change is crucial to ensuring that our world has a future at all.
Yeah, so here's the interesting thing about what happened during this whole coronavirus pandemic, right? Most of the United States went into stay-at-home order. So a majority of us were stuck at home, and many of us still are around the world. And what we found is that had a huge impact on the climate. All of a sudden, there were countries around the world that were saying that the smog had cleared, pollution had gone down, just by this very small change in a very short amount of time. So what that's illustrated to us is that our activities actually has a direct impact to the environment. So that's been now clearly established. So this is one of the silver linings, I would say, of this pandemic that has illustrated to us that we need to take care of our environment. But here's the thing that most people need to know. The majority of the pollution in our world is being done from the commercial sector. So from commercial businesses, corporations that are doing, following certain, methodologies and the way they bring products out to market, and also from commercial fishing and commercial farming. So here's what I believe we need to do. I believe that we need to incentivize companies that are carbon neutral companies, so that are able to bring products and services out into the market with the least impact to the environment. If we incentivize companies to do that and we put them all on the same footing, now they have an incentive to actually innovate. Because right now, the way our entire industry is is kind of formulated is it has absolutely no reason for companies to even worry about the environment. They're not incentivized in any way. The environment is not a factor in the way our industries work today. Once we make that a factor, we incentivize it, we make it a priority, then you're going to see people behaving differently, people innovating, people finding clean ways of doing things, bringing products out. So that's an important part. The second part is we absolutely need to move into renewable energy. So go into renewables, diversify into various different energy sources, and that is actually good for us from a multitude of areas because it doesn't make only one thing vulnerable. For example, you might have heard, the barrel of oil prices had dropped, and gone negative, for example. And why that happened is because the majority of our energy is coming from that sector, but we need to diversify, we need to go to renewables, and we may need to have a different future. Like, what if, people rotated days that they went to work? What if a lot of people work from home that really didn't need to go into work? What if you went to school, 3 days a week instead of all 5 days a week? We don't know. There may be lots of interesting ideas out there on how we can really protect our environment. Because as you guys said, if the world's not here, then there's no point to all of this. So those are kind of my thoughts around climate.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest fallacies that I see about climate change is that people are not denying climate change, but there's people saying that that humans aren't really affecting it to the extent that the left say that they are. But that is very apparently untrue through this time. Because the only difference between right now and before is that we're doing less to the environment. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. Right.
Okay.
And our next question comes to us from Deepak Kata. How do you plan to combat the partisan divide in the debate over gun control?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and of course, really important to you guys because of all the things happening around the country. So I want to share with you a couple of statistics right out of research. So right now, approximately 60% of all firearm deaths are suicides. And about half of those who are involved in mass shootings, they show warning signs that they're either a threat to themselves or to others. 64% of all gun violence deaths are from semi-automatic handguns. We don't talk a lot about handguns, but that's where the majority of the deaths are from. Now, here's the interesting thing. When you talk about becoming a Congress member, you have one job and one job only, and that is to represent the will, to represent the people in your district, and to represent the people of the United States of America. That is your job. Now, here's what America thinks about gun safety. 89% of all Americans support background checks on all gun purchases, including private sales. And that includes 83% of all gun owners. It also includes 72% of all NRA members. Okay, now let's move to Texas. A large majority of Texans, in fact, 79% of voters in Texas support and favor expanding mental health and criminal background checks on gun sales in every aspect. We're talking about Texas, okay? We're not talking about, liberal California or anything like that. We're talking about Texans. And of that, more than 60% of people strongly support background checks. So when you have that kind of overwhelming support, and remember, I didn't say Democrats, I didn't say Republicans. This is across all Texans. So when they're saying that's what they support, that's what I would do. And when we do things that the electorate calls for, the constituents call for, the people of Texas call for, then there is no partisan divide, because I think we all agree that we want you guys to be able to go to high school and never have to worry about shootings.
kind of completely agree with you on that one. Obviously, none of us want to go to school and worry that we're going to die at school.
Okay, and I think the next question as well is kind of similar to what we were talking about. If America had free healthcare, how do you think this would have affected the way the pandemic played on the country?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I really didn't realize is that you guys have really done a lot of work, that you've gone to so many different people and gotten questions from so many people. I'm super impressed because I thought maybe all the three of you came up with them, but it's so nice to hear that so many people contributed to this. But yes, obviously, what's going to happen after this pandemic is that the people who were unfortunate and had to, go into a hospital will be basically, stuck with hospital bills, and they're going to have to handle that. So obviously, having healthcare coverage for everyone all the time, especially if we can do it when it's cheaper, why wouldn't we go for that, right? It's just a no-brainer at that point. So,
right.
So pick
I think
one of the questions that you think that you really want an answer to.
So here's one that that is quite pertinent in our lives. What is your opinion on getting kids back to school in fall?
Oh, that's a really good question. So that a lot of universities have already said that they are not going back to a normal, freshman class that is going to come in. So I want to switch this question around to you guys. What do you guys think right now? How do you feel about going back to school in the fall?
Personally, I would really love to go back to school in the fall, but I think there's a lot of steps that we have to take to ensure that we're still being safe in our schools. And I think that comes with like wearing masks at school, increasing cleanliness of our school, possibly wearing gloves or having hand sanitizer stations. But I do think that it's doable to go back to school as long as we're smart about how we go back to school so that we can avoid getting more people sick and causing more death from COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Personally, this is something that I really want to go back to school, much as most people. It's interesting to see how as soon as they announced that school was ending, everyone was very happy. But now, after a long time of not being in school, everyone just wants to get back to school because we realize it's not as bad as as some of us make it out to be. But I've read a lot of articles about certain people's plans in certain school districts, and one that really I felt I would be most comfortable with, and I think would be very practical, is splitting up the times that people go to school. The way that would work is freshmen and sophomores would go at a certain time and then they would leave, and then juniors and seniors would go at a different time. So the school isn't as packed in large groups. So virus couldn't spread in that way. And another thing is making sure to check for fevers a lot more frequently. And if you're sick and you have a fever, to not come to school, and possibly if you do come to school with a fever, maybe some disciplinary action can be instructed then. But yeah, that's the main thing that I think, because I don't really just as a high schooler, I really don't want online classes because one, I don't get to see any of the people I want to see throughout my day, and two, I really haven't felt like I've learned much from online classes as far as my high school goes. That's nothing to drag on the teachers. This is a completely new thing for them too. But I really feel like learning in high school should be like a hands-on, in-person thing, and I think that is how younger people thrive and learn better.
Mm-hmm. And I think, just on the topic of getting back to school, I mean, with school, I think it's kind of serves more as not even just a focal point for education, just like a point for our community to gather around, things like that, things that really benefit us in the societal standpoint. And with go back to school, it's not just us or the teachers who are affected, it's janitors who won't have work, it's the lunch ladies who won't have work, and obviously it would be really great for us to all go back to school just to get some more normalcy back in our lives. But I mean, I think it's all kind of depends on the timetable the virus puts out for us. How things kind of pan out in the next couple of months in Texas would really factor into what I would think is a good idea or not a good idea. And we are talking to the RASC superintendent soon, Steve Flores, and hopefully we can get some answers from him regarding what he thinks as well.
See, I knew that turning this question back to you guys would be better because You're obviously smarter. You've thought this through way more. This impacts you. So you have some really good suggestions here. And what I would say is, hey, superintendent, you should be watching this video because these guys have some really good ideas.